The boy lived in a small, quiet town where everyone seemed to know each other. The streets were lined with low, sun-bleached houses, and the occasional sound of children playing echoed through narrow alleys. He loved this town in a way that only someone who had grown up with every cracked sidewalk and familiar tree could. But for him, life had always felt a little harder, a little quieter than it seemed for others. He was not like the other children. He didn't run in packs or shout across the playground. He preferred the corners of the classroom, the soft rustle of pages, and, above all, the piano in his small home. His house was modest, with peeling paint and a small yard that smelled faintly of flowers and old rain. Inside, in the living room that doubled as a kitchen and dining area, stood a second-hand upright piano. Its keys were slightly yellowed with age, and one of them had a tiny chip, but to him it was the most beautiful thing in the world. Every evening, after finishing his chores and homework, he would sit at that piano, pressing the keys with careful fingers. He did not play perfectly, far from it, but he loved the way the notes drifted and twirled in the air. Some evenings, when no one was around, he would close his eyes and let his fingers wander, imagining a crowd listening to him, imagining applause that had never come. School was a different world altogether. He walked the halls quietly, always trying to stay invisible, always trying to avoid the eyes that judged him. There were children who were faster, louder, smarter, or at least more confident. They noticed him sometimes, but never kindly. Whispers followed him down the corridors. Laughter snuck into classrooms, and sometimes a book or pencil would be knocked from his hands. "Why do you even try?" one boy had said once, leaning against the wall with a smirk. "You're never going to be good at anything." The boy had said nothing. He didn't argue, didn't fight back, didn't even cry in front of them. Instead, he carried those words home, storing them somewhere deep inside. At night, he would sit at the piano and play, letting his fingers tell the things he could not say aloud. The piano never laughed at him, never judged him, and never said he was not enough. It only listened and sang back. His parents were kind but often busy. His mother worked long hours at the small grocery store down the street, and his father spent most of his time fixing broken machines at a local garage. They supported him as best they could, offering gentle encouragement and quiet smiles when he practiced. But they had little time to notice the depth of his struggles at school, the weight of the mocking glances, or the way he would curl up in his room feeling invisible. Even so, he persisted. Every day after school, he would rush home, finish his chores, and sit down at the piano. He would press the keys slowly, carefully, learning the patterns by heart. Some days his small fingers ached, and some days the music sounded off, uneven, clumsy. Yet he played. Sometimes he played classical pieces he had seen in old books. Sometimes he tried to make up his own melodies. Even if no one else heard them, he felt that the music mattered. There were rare moments of quiet joy. On a rainy afternoon, when the sky was gray and the town seemed to sleep under the soft drizzle, he would play and imagine himself in a grand hall, a crowd of strangers leaning forward to listen. He could almost hear the applause, almost feel the warmth of recognition. These moments were brief, but they were enough to keep him going, enough to make him believe that maybe, just maybe, the world would one day notice. One particular afternoon, after a long day at school filled with laughter at his expense, he sat at the piano feeling more discouraged than usual. His shoulders slumped, and his fingers hovered uncertainly over the keys. He had been trying to learn a simple melody he had heard on the radio, a tune that seemed easy but was tripping him up at every turn. The notes stumbled, the rhythm wavered, and for a moment, he thought of giving up. Then he remembered the tiny chip on the white key in the middle, the one that had been there for years. He pressed it, and it made a slightly offbeat sound, but it still made a note, still made music. He realized then that even broken things could create something beautiful if someone cared enough to try. With that thought, he started again, slow and steady, pressing each key with care. The melody began to take shape, clumsy at first, but growing more confident with every attempt. Evening came, and the house darkened around him, the soft hum of distant traffic outside mingling with the music he created. His parents returned, tired from their long day, and peeked in. They saw him at the piano, his fingers moving more confidently now, and they smiled quietly at one another. They didn't need words. They knew he had found a place where he belonged, a place where he could be himself. Despite the small triumphs, the school remained a place of struggle. Each morning brought new challenges, new whispers, new laughs aimed at him. Sometimes he felt his resolve weaken, wondering why he bothered at all, why he even tried. But then he remembered the sound of the piano filling his living room, remembered the way the notes seemed to carry his dreams and fears alike. That music became a kind of armor, shielding him from the world's cruelty, giving him strength to face another day. The boy also began noticing small details around him that others overlooked. He saw the way sunlight fell across the dusty windowsill, the way the wind moved through the branches outside his classroom, the way a song could change his mood without him even realizing it. Music became his lens to the world, his way of understanding things he could not express with words. It gave him patience, it gave him hope, and above all, it gave him a quiet kind of courage. At night, when the house was silent and the moonlight spilled across the worn floorboards, he would play longer than usual. He would close his eyes and imagine an audience, imagine that the people who had mocked him at school were now sitting quietly, listening intently. Sometimes, he imagined their faces softening, their eyes widening in surprise, their laughter replaced by awe. These fantasies were fragile, delicate, but they kept him moving forward, note by note, day by day. His love for music was not about fame or recognition. It was about expression, about having a voice when the world seemed intent on silencing him. It was about proving to himself, more than anyone else, that he mattered, that his heart and his talent could create beauty, even in small, quiet ways. The piano became more than an instrument. It became a companion, a friend, and a guide. It taught him patience, persistence, and the subtle strength of continuing even when others did not believe in you. He didn't know then that these quiet hours at the piano would set the stage for something far bigger than he could imagine. He didn't know that one day he would stand in front of people who doubted him, and he would play something so unexpected, so moving, that it would leave everyone speechless. But the seeds of that moment were already being planted in these long, solitary evenings, in the careful practice of notes, in the resilience built through daily struggles. For now, though, it was just him and the piano, and that was enough. Each note, each melody, each small triumph over a missed key was a quiet victory. He pressed the keys, not thinking of the future, not thinking of the past, just letting the music flow. In those moments, the boy was free, unjudged, and unbroken. He was exactly who he was meant to be, and though the world outside his small home could be harsh, the music reminded him that beauty could exist even in the most unlikely places. As he finally closed the piano lid that evening, his heart felt lighter than it had all day. There was a soft smile on his face, a sense of calm and determination that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. He knew he had a long journey ahead, filled with challenges, teasing, and doubt. But he also knew that the music inside him was stronger than any laughter or mockery. He would keep playing, keep dreaming, and one day the world would have to listen. And so, the boy went to bed that night with the soft sound of his own music still ringing in his ears, unaware that the first chapter of a remarkable story was quietly unfolding. Each struggle, each whispered insult, each moment of isolation, was shaping him into someone ready for something extraordinary. The piano had given him courage, and courage, he knew, was the first step toward changing everything. The next morning, the boy woke to the usual sounds of the small town. The soft chatter of neighbors beginning their day, the distant clatter of carts on the uneven streets, and the occasional bark of a dog in the alley. The world outside his window was alive, moving on as if nothing had changed. Yet for him, today felt different. His school had announced something that had immediately caught the attention of every student, whether they admitted it or not. The principal had sent a note to every class. There would be a talent show in 2 weeks, and all students were encouraged to participate. The boy's heart skipped a beat as he read the announcement. Talent show. The words felt heavy in his chest. He loved music, he lived for it, but performing in front of people? The thought made his stomach twist with nerves. He had never played the piano for anyone outside his house. Even his parents, though supportive, were rarely there when he practiced. And now, he was being asked to stand on a stage and show something so personal to people who had already made fun of him. At first, he dismissed the idea entirely. He tucked the paper into his notebook, trying to convince himself that he didn't care, that he had no interest in such things. He would stay in the background, as always, letting others take the spotlight. But as the day went on, the announcement lingered in his mind. His friends, those few he trusted, were excited, talking loudly about the acts they would perform. Singing, dancing, magic tricks. It all sounded so easy and bold. He, however, felt exposed just thinking about sitting at the piano with all eyes on him. During lunch, he sat at the far end of the cafeteria, picking at his sandwich, watching his classmates chatter excitedly. Some of them were already practicing, showing off snippets of songs, rehearsing moves, laughing and cheering each other on. A few students glanced at him, smirking. "You're not really going to play piano, are you?" One boy called across the table. "Don't make us laugh too hard." The boy said nothing, keeping his gaze on the floor. A faint heat rose to his cheeks, but he forced himself to stay quiet. Words like that had followed him all his life, and he had grown used to carrying them without answering. After school, he walked home slowly, the announcement and the mocking comments spinning in his mind. His hands itched to touch the piano, to lose himself in music, but fear made him hesitate. What if he failed? What if everyone laughed harder than they ever had before? What if the music he loved so much turned into another reason for teasing? He clenched his fists, trying to push the thoughts away, but they lingered like shadows at the edges of his mind. When he arrived home, the house was quiet. His parents were still at work, and the small living room smelled faintly of the dinner his mother had left warming on the stove. The piano waited, silent, almost expectant. He approached it cautiously, sitting on the worn bench and letting his fingers hover over the keys. He closed his eyes and breathed in slowly, feeling the familiar sense of calm begin to settle over him. The piano had always been a safe place, a world where mistakes didn't matter, and where the music could speak what words could not. Slowly, he began to play. At first, the notes were hesitant, uneven, reflecting the turmoil in his mind. He played a simple melody he had been practicing for weeks, the one that had started to feel like his own. As he played, he imagined a small audience, just a few people quietly listening, not judging, not laughing. The music flowed more smoothly, more confidently, and with each note, he felt a tiny spark of courage ignite inside him. The next day at school, he found himself unable to stop thinking about the talent show. He wandered the halls, listening to snippets of conversations, watching students discuss costumes and songs, and feeling both distant and drawn in. His teacher, noticing his quiet distraction, approached him with a gentle smile. "You play piano, don't you?" she asked softly. "Maybe you should consider performing. You might surprise yourself." The boy's heart jumped. Her words were kind, but they carried weight. She believed in him in a way few others had, and her encouragement felt like a hand reaching out through the fog of doubt. Yet at the same time, fear clawed at him, whispering that he wasn't ready, that he wasn't good enough, that this was a mistake. He nodded slowly, not committing to anything, and walked away, his mind a whirlwind of hope and anxiety. For the next several days, he wrestled with the idea of performing. Each evening, he sat at the piano, experimenting with new melodies, trying to imagine what it would be like to play in front of others. He practiced in secret, careful to finish before his parents returned, so no one would notice how much the thought of the talent show consumed him. Every note he played seemed to echo in his chest, reminding him of both the joy and the fear intertwined in his music. At school, the teasing began in subtle ways. A few students whispered whenever he walked past, making little jokes about the piano boy and the talent show. It stung, more than he wanted to admit, but instead of lashing out, he buried the hurt in silence, focusing on his music. It became a quiet rebellion, a way to show that their words could not break him, that his love for the piano was stronger than any ridicule. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly difficult section of a song, he hit a wrong note and froze. For a moment, he imagined the audience at the talent show laughing at the mistake, the same way some students at school laughed when he struggled with simple tasks. The fear threatened to overwhelm him, but then he remembered the evenings spent at the piano, the small victories of mastering a tricky passage, the way the music had comforted him through lonely days. He exhaled, pressed the keys again, and played through the mistake, letting the sound flow without judgment. The decision to participate began to take shape slowly, almost imperceptibly. He didn't tell anyone at first, not even his parents. He continued to practice in secret, rehearsing the melody over and over, imagining how it would feel to finally sit on the stage, to let the music speak for him. There were moments of doubt, of course, when fear whispered that he should back out, that he would only humiliate himself. But with each passing day, the spark of courage grew stronger, fueled by the small victories at the piano and the quiet belief that maybe he could do this. Finally, a week before the talent show, he made his decision. He would participate. He would face the fear and sit at that piano in front of everyone, even if his hands shook and his stomach twisted. The music inside him was too important to keep hidden, and he knew that this was his chance, small as it might be, to show the world a piece of who he truly was. When he told his teacher quietly after class, she smiled and nodded, her eyes shining with encouragement. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Just play from your heart, and that will be enough." The boy felt a warmth he hadn't known he could feel in the presence of others. He nodded, trying to absorb her words, trying to carry that reassurance like a shield against the inevitable nerves that awaited him. Over the next several days, his routine shifted. He continued to practice in secret, but now with a purpose, with a goal that stretched beyond the quiet of his living room. Every evening, he would play the melody, refining it, learning how to express emotion through each note. He imagined the faces of the audience, imagined the initial doubt turning into surprise, imagined the way the music could reach hearts even if words could not. Each practice session left him more confident, though the fear never completely disappeared. School became a mix of anxiety and quiet anticipation. The whispers of other students followed him, but he learned to ignore them, focusing instead on the music that lived inside him. Sometimes, when he caught glimpses of classmates practicing for their own acts, he felt a pang of envy at their confidence and ease. But it was mixed with determination. If they could face their own fears, maybe he could too. The night before the talent show, he stayed up late at the piano, playing softly while the house slept around him. His fingers danced over the keys, moving more confidently than ever before. The melody he had struggled with weeks ago now flowed naturally, each note carrying a piece of his heart. He felt a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing that tomorrow would demand something more than practice. It would demand courage. As he finally closed the piano lid that night, he felt a quiet sense of readiness. Fear was still there, as it always would be, but it was accompanied by hope, by a growing belief in himself and in the power of the music he loved. Tomorrow he would step onto that stage, and no matter what happened, he would face it with everything he had. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of something incredible. He imagined that perhaps, just perhaps, the audience would be surprised, moved, or even inspired. He imagined the music reaching beyond the walls of the room, touching people in ways words could never do. The thought was fragile, delicate, but it carried him through the night, filling him with a sense of anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. And so, with the first light of morning spilling into his small room, he rose, ready to face the challenge he had chosen for himself. The talent show was no longer a distant announcement on a piece of paper. It was real, and it was his. The boy carried with him the lessons of patience, perseverance, and the quiet strength of believing in something only he could see. Tomorrow he would play, and the world would finally hear the music that had lived in his heart all this time. The day of the talent show arrived with a mix of excitement and tension that seemed to hang in the air like a thick fog. The boy walked into the school auditorium, his heart pounding so loudly, he thought it might be heard over the chatter of students and the shuffling of chairs. The room was packed with parents, teachers, and classmates, all buzzing with anticipation. Colorful decorations hung from the walls, and a small stage had been set up with a single microphone and a grand piano that gleamed under the stage lights. The boy's stomach twisted as he took in the scene, feeling the weight of every eye that might turn toward him, every whisper that might reach his ears. He stayed near the back of the room, hands deep in his pockets, trying to steady his breathing. Other students practiced last-minute moves or ran through lines of dialogue, laughing and joking with friends. Some were confident, moving with ease under the bright lights and expectant eyes. He, on the other hand, felt small, invisible, and yet acutely exposed. The thought of stepping onto that stage made him feel as if the floor might swallow him whole. Every time he imagined the audience watching him, he imagined them laughing, waiting for him to make a mistake, waiting for the moment he would fail. His teacher, who had quietly encouraged him to participate, appeared at his side, offering a reassuring smile. "You've practiced enough," she said softly. "Now just play from your heart. That's all anyone can ask." The boy nodded, gripping his hands together behind his back. Her words were kind, but they could not reach the depth of the fear and anticipation swirling inside him. Still, the presence of someone who believed in him gave him a faint glimmer of courage, a small shield against the mocking thoughts that had haunted him for so long. The show began, one act after another. Students sang songs, performed skits, and demonstrated magic tricks. Each performance was met with applause, laughter, or polite clapping, and the boy felt a mixture of awe and envy. The performers seemed so confident, so natural under the bright lights, while he wrestled with the idea that he might crumble the moment he sat at the piano. He kept fiddling with the hem of his shirt, trying to make himself feel invisible even as his name was announced for the next act. The moment came faster than he expected. The announcer called his name, and a hush fell over the room. His legs felt heavy, and his chest tightened as he made his way to the stage. The bright lights hit him, and for a moment, he could not see anything except a blur of faces. Whispers carried through the air, some curious, some doubtful, some mocking. "The piano boy," someone muttered. "This should be interesting." The boy's stomach lurched, but he kept walking, each step measured and deliberate. He reached the piano and paused, taking a deep breath. His fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly, as he tried to remember every practice session, every evening spent in quiet solitude perfecting the melody. The room seemed impossibly large, the audience impossibly close, and for a moment, panic threatened to overtake him. He closed his eyes briefly, imagining the familiar comfort of his own living room, the gentle hum of the piano surrounding him. That memory steadied him. He could do this. He had practiced for years for moments just like this, even if he had never realized it. As his fingers touched the keys, the first notes sounded soft and hesitant, barely carrying through the room. A few students snickered, expecting the clumsy mistakes they had imagined for weeks. The boy's hands shook, and he nearly pulled them away, but he forced himself to continue. Slowly, the melody began to take shape, each note becoming more confident than the last. The music moved carefully at first, like a timid bird testing its wings, but with every passing measure, it grew steadier, stronger, more deliberate. The audience remained silent, caught somewhere between curiosity and disbelief. Some students leaned forward in their seats, eyebrows raised, unsure of what to expect. The boy could feel their doubt pressing down on him, but instead of letting it distract him, he let it fuel him. Each note was not just a sound, but a message, a declaration that he belonged here, that his talent was real, that he had a voice that deserved to be heard. As he played, something shifted. The melody, which had begun cautiously, began to flow with emotion, carrying the experiences of lonely afternoons, whispered insults, and secret victories at the piano. The audience seemed to sense the change. Parents glanced at each other with soft smiles, students fell silent, and even some of the mocking whispers died away, replaced by an almost tangible tension. It was as if the music itself had created a bubble around him, shielding him from judgment and opening a space where only the melody mattered. He had never realized how much the piano could express until this moment. Every note was tinged with hope, fear, determination, and joy. His fingers moved with a fluidity he had not known they possessed, finding patterns and harmonies that had existed only in his imagination. The small mistakes he had feared became part of the performance, humanizing it, giving it depth. By the time he reached the middle of the piece, the audience was captivated, their attention fully absorbed by the sound that filled the auditorium. Some students who had whispered doubts earlier now sat rigidly, their eyes wide with surprise. Teachers exchanged impressed glances, realizing that the boy they had quietly encouraged had transformed into something extraordinary in front of them. The boy himself felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. He had expected fear to dominate the experience, but instead, he found a sense of release, as if every hour of secret practice and every moment of ridicule had led to this single, powerful expression. The music continued to swell, carrying emotion and story without words. The boy imagined the notes as bridges, connecting his own quiet world to the lives of the people listening. He thought of the evenings spent in his small living room, of the way the piano had comforted him when no one else could, and of the courage that had slowly grown within him. Now that courage had a voice, and the audience could hear it. By the time he reached the final passage, the room was utterly silent, every person holding their breath. The notes lingered in the air, the soft echo of the piano filling the space with a sense of wonder and awe. When the last key was pressed, there was a pause, a brief, suspended moment where time seemed to hold its breath along with him. Then, as if waking from a spell, the audience erupted in applause. Hands clapped vigorously, cheers filled the room, and some parents even wiped away quiet tears. The boy could barely believe it. He looked up at the crowd, at the faces he had feared would mock him, and saw admiration, surprise, and joy reflected in their eyes. The boy rose slightly from the piano bench, feeling a warmth he had never known before. The mocking, the doubts, the fear, they all seemed to melt away in the echo of the applause. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to be seen, truly seen, for his talent and for the person he was. His fingers hovered over the keys for a final moment, savoring the silence that followed the performance before he gently closed the piano lid. As he stepped away from the piano and toward the edge of the stage, his legs felt like they were walking on air. His chest heaved with excitement and relief, a radiant smile breaking across his face. Some students who had whispered cruelly before now approached him hesitantly, offering words of congratulations. Even those who had doubted him could not help but acknowledge the beauty of what they had just witnessed. The boy felt a new sense of confidence stirring within him, a quiet knowledge that he had faced his fears and had come out stronger on the other side. After the show, when he returned to his seat, his teacher gently squeezed his shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You let the music speak, and it spoke loudly." The boy nodded, still overwhelmed by the intensity of the experience. He realized that this moment, terrifying as it had been, had changed something inside him. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. He had learned that his voice, through the piano, could touch people in ways words never could. In the days that followed, the boy found that things at school had shifted. The whispers and mocking looks had faded, replaced by curiosity and respect. Some students approached him to ask questions about the music he had played. Others watched quietly during practice, hoping to learn from him. He felt a new connection to the world around him, a sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. The talent show had not only revealed his skill to others, but it had also revealed something to himself, that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. Though he still practiced in the evenings at home, the music now carried a new layer of confidence and joy. Each note was infused with the memory of the performance, with the applause that had filled the auditorium, and with the knowledge that fear could be conquered through persistence and courage. The piano was no longer just a private refuge. It had become a bridge to the world, a way to connect with others, and to express emotions that words could not capture. And yet, the boy knew that this was only the beginning. The talent show had been a small stage, but it had opened doors to possibilities he had never dared to consider. He had learned that his music had power, that it could move people and inspire them. But more importantly, he had learned that he had the strength to face challenges, to step into the unknown, and to let his heart guide him through fear. The boy returned home that night, the echoes of applause still ringing in his mind. He sat at his piano, pressing the keys softly, letting the melody flow without any pressure or expectation. He realized that the true reward of the performance was not the recognition or the applause, but the courage and belief it had instilled in him. The music had always been there, waiting patiently, and now he could finally see just how powerful it could be. As he played late into the night, he imagined the future, filled with new challenges and opportunities, each one a chance to grow, to express, and to connect through music. He understood that there would always be fear, doubt, and uncertainty, but he also knew that courage, once discovered, could carry him through anything. The boy smiled quietly to himself, feeling a sense of hope and determination that he had never felt before. He was no longer just a boy playing in a small living room. He was a young musician, ready to face the world, note by note, with all the strength and emotion that lived within him. The moment the boy's fingers touched the keys, the room seemed to change. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost like a whisper meant only for those who would listen carefully. At first, some students still shifted in their seats, unsure if this would be the clumsy performance they had expected. But gradually, the melody began to grow, filling the auditorium with a warmth and emotion that no one had anticipated. The sound was gentle yet commanding, intricate yet simple, and it carried with it something deeper than music alone. A story of struggle, courage, and quiet determination. As he played, the boy closed his eyes, letting the memories of countless evenings spent alone at the piano guide his fingers. He remembered the afternoons when his classmates laughed at him, the whispered insults in the hallways, and the many times he had doubted himself. Each note he played was infused with those experiences, shaped by the tears and triumphs that had made him who he was. The audience, at first hesitant, seemed to sense this, leaning forward slightly, their whispers fading into silence as they became absorbed by the music. Some parents in the crowd exchanged glances, surprised by the depth of emotion emanating from the boy's performance. They had seen students perform plenty of times, but this was different. There was a raw honesty to it, a vulnerability that made them lean in, hearts tugged by the story that unfolded without a single word. Even the students who had mocked him before began to sit straighter, unsure how to react to the music that now filled the room. The melody was not just notes arranged in a pattern. It was a reflection of the boy's life, his struggles, and his perseverance. The boy's hands moved more confidently with each measure, his fingers dancing across the keys in a way that seemed effortless, though it had taken months of secret practice to reach this point. He played with both precision and emotion, letting the music rise and fall, breathe and swell, telling a story of someone who had been underestimated but refused to give up. The room felt suspended in time. Every person listening seemed to hold their breath, caught in the delicate web of sound he had woven. A few students who had been laughing earlier felt their laughter die in their throats. They exchanged uncertain glances, their eyebrows raised in surprise, even awe. "I didn't expect that," one whispered quietly to a friend, almost afraid to break the spell. Another shook his head slowly, eyes wide. The boy's music had pierced through their assumptions, breaking the barrier of mockery they had so confidently built. It was as if the piano itself had become a voice for something they could not see or understand, a voice that demanded attention and respect. The boy himself felt a transformation within him as he continued to play. The nerves and fear that had gripped him moments before seemed to dissolve, replaced by a quiet certainty that this was exactly where he was meant to be. His heart still raced, but it was no longer from anxiety. It was the thrill of creation, the power of sharing something deeply personal and finding that it resonated with others. Each note became a thread connecting him to the audience, weaving a bond that transcended words. Even the teacher who had encouraged him to participate sat in awe, her hands folded calmly in her lap, eyes glistening with quiet pride. She had known he had talent, but she had never imagined it would be this moving, this compelling. Every small practice session, every moment of doubt he had worked through, had culminated in this one extraordinary performance. The boy's music spoke not only of skill but of resilience, of hope, and of the courage it takes to keep going when the world seems intent on proving you wrong. The middle of the piece brought a change in tempo, a gentle rise and fall that mirrored the ups and downs of the boy's journey. It was playful in some moments, somber in others, a reflection of life itself. He had woven into the melody the lessons he had learned in quiet solitude. Patience, persistence, and the importance of believing in something when no one else does. Every chord seemed intentional, every pause meaningful, and every crescendo an emotional release that left the audience captivated. Parents leaned forward in their seats, some wiping away tears they had not expected to shed. Even the students, who had been skeptical from the start, felt the music resonate in a way that surprised them. The boy's performance had become more than a display of talent. It was an experience, a story told through sound, a journey of someone who had been underestimated and yet refused to surrender. The auditorium, once filled with chatter and movement, now held a profound silence, the kind that speaks of awe and wonder. A few of the students who had mocked him before were now completely still, unable to look away. They saw the boy in a new light, not as someone to ridicule, but as someone who had poured his heart and soul into every note. There was a humility in his performance, a quiet dignity that demanded respect. The music carried his emotions, his past, and his dreams, and for the first time, the audience truly understood the depth of his talent. As the piece neared its end, the boy played with a sense of freedom he had never felt before. The music seemed to lift him above the stage, above the fears that had haunted him, allowing him to exist solely in the moment. He could feel the energy of the room responding to him, a subtle shift in atmosphere as the audience became fully immersed in the beauty of the performance. Every note lingered, carrying the weight of his experiences, and yet offering hope, joy, and a quiet triumph over the obstacles he had faced. When he reached the final measures, he slowed slightly, letting each chord resonate, allowing the final notes to hang in the air like a breath caught in time. The boy held them for a heartbeat longer, savoring the sound, the connection, and the feeling of being fully seen for the first time. Then, as his fingers lifted from the last key, a profound silence filled the auditorium. It was a silence unlike any other, heavy with emotion, reflection, and awe. And then, as if released from a spell, the audience erupted in applause. The sound was thunderous, filling the room with cheers, clapping, and even shouts of admiration. The boy felt his heart soar, the joy and relief overwhelming him. He had faced the fear, he had played from his heart, and the world had listened. The applause carried him forward, a wave of recognition that he had never experienced before. It was not just about skill, it was about courage, perseverance, and the undeniable truth of his talent. He stood from the piano bench, a small, shy smile spreading across his face. The applause continued, ringing in his ears and filling him with a sense of triumph that went far beyond winning or losing. He had proven to himself, more than anyone else, that he was capable, that his love for music mattered, and that even the quietest voices could be heard if they were brave enough to speak. Some of the students who had doubted him approached hesitantly, offering congratulations that felt almost awkward, yet sincere. "That was amazing," one whispered. Another nodded, unable to find more words, simply staring at the piano with a newfound respect. Even the ones who had been skeptical were forced to acknowledge the beauty of what they had just witnessed. The boy realized that he had not only shared his music but had changed perceptions, showing everyone that courage and talent often come from the most unexpected places. After the performance, as he walked off the stage, the boy felt lighter than he had in years. The fear that had gripped him for so long had been replaced by a quiet pride and a newfound confidence. He could still remember the teasing and the doubt, but now those memories were softened, transformed by the knowledge that he had overcome them. For the first time, he felt the full power of his own abilities, the truth that music was not just a private comfort, but a bridge to the hearts of others. That night, Back at home, he sat at his piano once more. The room was quiet, the familiar comfort of the keys beneath his fingers welcoming him. But this time, the music felt different. It was not just practice or escape. It was a celebration, a reflection of what had just occurred. He played the melody again, letting it flow freely, savoring the connection he had created with the audience and the courage he had found within himself. The boy knew that this moment would stay with him forever. The talent show had been a turning point, a moment where fear had been transformed into triumph and doubt into recognition. He had discovered the power of sharing his passion, of trusting himself, and of letting his music speak for him. And while the journey was far from over, he now carried a quiet certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, he had the strength to face them, one note at a time. Even in the days that followed, the echoes of that performance lingered in the boy's mind. Students and teachers alike approached him with admiration, not just for his skill, but for the bravery he had displayed. He felt a shift in the way the world looked at him, but more importantly, he felt a shift within himself. The boy realized that courage and talent, when nurtured with patience and love, could create moments that were unforgettable, not just for him, but for everyone who had witnessed them. And so, as he sat at his piano that night, letting the music flow once more, he understood something profound. It was not just the applause or recognition that mattered. It was the journey, the struggle, and the willingness to play despite fear, to share something deeply personal, and to trust that it could touch the hearts of others. The boy smiled quietly to himself, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the music he loved had not only been heard, but had also left an imprint on those who had listened. After the talent show, the boy felt as if he were walking in a dream. The memory of the applause, the silence, and the faces of the audience replayed in his mind over and over. Every step he took at school the next day felt lighter than before, as if a weight that had been pressing on him for years had finally lifted. He could hear students whispering, but this time it was not mockery. It was admiration, awe, and curiosity. Some walked past with smiles, others nodded quietly in recognition, and a few even approached him, unsure how to express what they had felt during his performance. He tried not to let it overwhelm him. It was strange to suddenly feel noticed, to feel that something he had loved in secret had finally been seen and appreciated. For years, the piano had been a quiet companion, a place of refuge and comfort, a way to escape the cruelty of the world outside his small home. But now, that refuge had transformed into a bridge to others, a way to communicate what words alone could not convey. Every glance of respect, every compliment, every small gesture of acknowledgement reminded him that his love for music had always mattered, even if no one else had known it. Even the students who had teased him before the talent show began to act differently. Some still hesitated around him, unsure how to adjust, while others tried to understand the boy they had overlooked for so long. They asked him questions about the melodies he had played, the techniques he had used, and even requested that he show them a few pieces. At first, he was cautious, unsure if they were genuinely interested or simply trying to fit in after seeing him succeed. But as he shared his music, even in small moments, he saw genuine curiosity and respect in their eyes. The boy realized that sometimes people needed to see courage in action to understand its meaning. His teacher continued to support him, encouraging him quietly without fanfare. She reminded him that the performance was only one step in a much longer journey. "Talent is important," she said one afternoon, "but courage and persistence are what make someone truly remarkable. Never forget what you did on that stage." The boy nodded, understanding more deeply than ever what she meant. The talent show had been a single moment, yes, but it had also become a symbol of everything he had endured, every small victory he had achieved in private, every hour spent practicing when no one was watching. At home, the piano no longer felt like a private refuge alone. It was still a place of comfort, but now it also carried the echoes of applause, the warmth of recognition, and the knowledge that his music could reach others. Each time he played, he thought of the audience in the auditorium, of the way their expressions had shifted from doubt to admiration, and of the way the music had created a connection between him and them. It was a reminder that the fear he had felt for so long could be transformed into something beautiful when met with courage and persistence. Evenings became a time not only for practice but for reflection. The boy thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. The teasing at school, the long solitary hours at the piano, the self-doubt, and the quiet determination that had driven him forward. Each note he played now carried the memory of that journey. Each melody a celebration of the courage it had taken to persevere. He realized that the music was more than sound. It was a testament to resilience, a reflection of hope, and a message that even the quietest voices could be heard if they were brave enough to speak. The boy began to take more risks, both in his music and in other areas of life. He experimented with new melodies, tried more complex pieces, and allowed himself to improvise in ways he had never dared before. The fear of failure was still present, but it no longer paralyzed him. Instead, it became a companion, a reminder of how far he had come and a motivator to continue exploring his abilities. Each new piece he learned became a small adventure, a challenge he approached with determination, patience, and joy. School also felt different. The boy walked through the halls with a quiet confidence that had been absent before. He still preferred his corners and quiet spaces, but he no longer felt invisible or powerless. Students treated him with more respect, some even seeking his advice or asking him to play for small gatherings. The teasing that had once been a constant shadow was replaced by curiosity, encouragement, and the occasional admiration that left him both humbled and inspired. For the first time, he understood what it felt like to belong, to be seen, and to have his talents recognized without fear of ridicule. One afternoon, the boy's parents noticed a change as well. They had always supported him quietly, but now they saw a new light in his eyes, a quiet confidence and pride that had not been there before. His mother commented softly that he seemed happier, more sure of himself, and his father nodded, noting the way he carried himself with a subtle sense of purpose. They had always known he was special, but they now saw that his talent and courage were beginning to shape him into someone even stronger and more resilient. The boy's relationship with music deepened further. He began composing his own pieces, small melodies at first, gradually building into longer, more expressive works. Each composition became a personal story, a reflection of his experiences, emotions, and dreams. He found joy not only in performing but also in creating, in shaping the music in ways that felt entirely his own. The piano had become not just a tool, but a companion, a guide, and a mirror for his heart and soul. The experience of performing at the talent show also taught him the value of connection. He realized that music was not only a personal refuge but also a way to reach out to others, to touch hearts, and to share a part of himself that words could never fully express. The applause, the smiles, the quiet admiration, all of it became a reminder that courage and vulnerability could create bonds between people in ways that were profound and lasting. As weeks turned into months, the boy continued to grow. He participated in small recitals, played for friends and family, and even began teaching younger students the basics of piano. Each time he shared his music, he felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment that went beyond his own enjoyment. He saw how the piano could change not only his life but also the lives of those around him, inspiring others to explore their own passions and to face challenges with courage. The boy also learned something unexpected about himself. He discovered that the journey of music was not just about skill or recognition. It was about understanding, patience, and the quiet strength that comes from persistence. He realized that every mistake he had made, every moment of fear or self-doubt, had been a step along the path to becoming the musician he was becoming. The talent show had been a milestone, yes, but the real transformation had occurred long before, in the countless hours of practice, in the silent determination, and in the unwavering love for music that had carried him through everything. At home, late at night, he would sit at the piano and play, letting his thoughts drift as his fingers moved across the keys. Sometimes he thought about the talent show, sometimes about the future, and sometimes simply about the joy of making music. Each time he felt a deep connection to himself, to the piano, and to the people who had witnessed his journey. The music had become a language of its own, a way to express what could not be said aloud, and a reminder that courage, when nurtured, could lead to moments of beauty and triumph. The boy knew that challenges would continue to come. Life would not always be easy, and there would still be moments of doubt, fear, and insecurity. But he also knew that he had discovered something within himself that could never be taken away. The power to face those challenges, the ability to persevere, and the courage to share his heart with the world through music. The talent show had been a beginning, not an ending, and the lessons he had learned there would guide him for the rest of his life. One evening, after another long practice session, he leaned back from the piano and smiled. He thought about the journey he had taken, from the lonely hours at home, to the teasing at school, to the stage that had once seemed so terrifying, to the moment the audience had listened in awe. Every step had shaped him, strengthened him, and reminded him that even in moments of fear, it was possible to find courage. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that the music he loved could not only bring him joy but also inspire, comfort, and move others. The boy's story became one not just of talent, but of resilience, determination, and the quiet triumph of a young musician who refused to be defined by others' doubts. He had faced fear, endured mockery, and stepped into the spotlight with courage and vulnerability. And in doing so, he had discovered the profound truth that sometimes the most remarkable victories are not the ones that are loudly celebrated, but the ones that grow quietly, persistently, and patiently within us. In the end, the boy returned to the piano every day, as he had for years, but now with a new understanding of what it meant to play. Each note carried not only sound but also story, emotion, and heart. Each melody was a testament to the courage it had taken to step onto that stage and the determination it had taken to continue pursuing what he loved. He had learned that success was not measured solely by recognition, but by the strength to face fear, the ability to persevere, and the willingness to share one's heart with the world. And so, the boy continued to play, growing in skill and confidence, sharing his music with those willing to listen, and carrying with him the lessons of courage, patience, and resilience that would guide him for the rest of his life. He had faced mockery, doubt, and fear, and yet he had emerged stronger, more confident, and deeply connected to the music that had always been his refuge. He had discovered that the most extraordinary journeys often begin quietly, in small, private moments, and that the courage to pursue one's passion can change not only the life of the one who dares to dream, but also the lives of everyone who witnesses it.